9 p.m. Eastern. And I've been doing this for a while now. Seems like I started yesterday, but I think I started doing this in sometime in 2017. I think we started off on Tuesdays, but now we've been on Wednesdays for quite a while now. And I often call this my favorite time of the week because, of course, the rest of the time, the listeners are just listening to me. All of you are just listening to me talk and you hear my guest talk. I don't get to have a lot of one-on-one interaction with the listeners in this type of setting. I do get some on Facebook, but it's really hard to do some good conversation on there. And but we do have that here. And hello, Little Bit, and Carrie, and Susan, and Laura. How's everybody doing? Tamara. Oh my stars. Love that. Jessica, how are you? The volume seems really low. I don't know what to tell you. You're just going to have to turn it up. Jessica, this is as good as it gets. So I've been doing this program for a while, and it's just a time once again to talk to all of you. Hello, Christy. And I also get a chance to maybe further expound on true crime issues that, of course, I never touch during the episodes or in any other venue. And so that gives me an opportunity to talk about some issues in the news, anything that pops up with any of Unfound's cases. I get to tell all of you some things that are going on with Unfound. And then, of course, on this medium also gives me a chance to preview Friday's case. I do that at the end of every one of these live shows. And that's what I'll be doing tonight with we're going to be covering the disappearance of Tyler North on Friday. He disappeared from Harlan County in Kentucky just last summer of 2018. So a fairly recent and new disappearance. Christy and Jessica, a little bit. Sharon. Hello, Heather. Valerie, Karen, LaFord. I hope all of you are doing really well tonight. I'm doing good. I've been getting some work done. I did the interview for Friday's episode on Monday night. I did the interview for next Friday's episode on Tuesday night. So I always like to work ahead a little bit. Anytime I can do that, I certainly take advantage of it. And these are two. I thought both interviews went really, really well, and I hope you will agree when you hear them. Carrie says, I've joined Tyler's page. This case looks heated. I guess that's one word to use, Carrie, and I will talk about that when I get to it later in the show. But it's been beautiful here in Clearwater Beach. I've been kind of cleaning my place up a little bit. And, I spent some time away. I went to Orlando. I went to Pennsylvania, went to Canada. And over the past few days, I've been doing like one room at a time, the kitchen, the living room. And I don't like, for me to clean the whole place at one time is just asking too much. So I clean like this room and then the kitchen and then the guest bathroom, like one each day. And I eventually get it all done. So that's what I'm in the process of doing right now. James, what's up? Lena. So that's what's been going on. And if maybe some of you, once again, later in the program, I just posted maybe a half hour ago, 45 minutes ago, the interview, or it's an article in which I'm partially interviewed in it for the disappearance of Tyler North. And that was an interview that was done earlier today. In fact, you will notice I'm wearing the same shirt I was wearing for that interview. We did that over Skype. So Carla, good to see you tonight as well. So it's been beautiful here. Let's first talk about, hey Cherie, what's going on? Thank you for looking over everything tonight. I deeply appreciate it. I want to talk about the poll for the Tiffany Johnson case. Of course, that was last Friday's case. It was a unique one in that a suspect has been convicted in her disappearance, but not for murder, but for aggravated kidnapping. And the poll question was, what do you think that Chris Revel did with Tiffany Johnson? If he, of course, a jury has decided he did kidnap her, what happened? A large majority of you decided that he probably ended up killing her and putting her in a trash bin somewhere in the area, wherever his phone tracked him during that hour and a half that he was gone. And then, of course, he came back to the apartment complex and was taken into custody. I think that's a very reasonable idea. I think it's a very reasonable choice. You know, the tough part is that regarding that choice, and we talked about this in the think tank on Sunday nights, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the think tank here before the show's over, that the tough part is that, you know, they knew Tiffany was missing very quickly. And from what I understand, what Janelle has told me is that all the trash bins and landfills in the area have been checked. They've been gone over, and Tiffany has not been found. So you would think that if you put her in a trash bin and they were very quick to start looking at that as a possibility, they would have found her, but they haven't. I think this certainly opens up the idea that that's not what he did, even though that makes a lot of sense, no doubt about it. Given a very small time frame, that would be a very quick way to get rid of a body. You know, investigators, the police, the families, searchers have looked into that, and they haven't been able to find her, despite, as I wrote about in the Patreon blog, the science of finding bodies in landfills is fairly accepted. It's not something that's new, being that paperwork is kept regarding when a load comes in and where it goes on what day and everything. It should be fairly easy for police to go to a certain area and do that, to find a. I think you timed out the wrong person, Cherie. You might have done that. So you might hold on a second. I need to contact Cherie privately for a second before. Hold on. Okay. Cherie, check your messenger, please. Okay. Let me see if I can find this. Where is this? Okay. So, I think, once again, I think that thinking that he disposed of her in a trash receptacle, one of the big ones, I think of them as being green, but they can be all colors, it makes a lot of sense. But being that was looked into and they didn't find anything, I think we have to open up our minds to the idea that he did something else. So, and what could that other thing be? Hard to say. Tara Ann, what's going on? Concha, great to see you. Okay, thank you, Cherie. Thank you. That's no problem, Cherie. Don't worry about it. Mistakes are accepted on Unfound. So that's the poll. I'm not here to criticize what everybody think. I think that I really don't have, a better explanation. I think that looking at all the choices, maybe I might pick a trash bin as well. But this might be a situation where we need to think about this even a little more technical, and maybe open our mind to other ideas. As I posted in the group, that Season 2, Volume 1, the print edition, is now available. I worked on that cover this past weekend, got it to where it looked really good. I'm so happy that with each one of these books, I've been able to keep that theme of like filing cabinets or files in the background. I don't know how many of you have ever noticed that, but each one of those covers has like a filing cabinet or a file system or just plain manila folders in the background for the print edition. And I'm so happy that I've been able to keep the colors changing from one to the next. I have not repeated a color yet. I think the first one was white and red. The first one was mixed green and black, and then we had a blue one, and then we had like a tan one, and like a metal silver one, and then and then a red one. And now season 2, volume 1 is brown. I think it looks really good. I had to lighten it up a little bit so all the words could be seen, but you should know I design all of those covers myself. I don't have an art department. I do that on a program called Canva. It's at canva.com. I have a subscriber there. And if you're into making things and being artsy, it's a great website. I've been using it for what, I don't know, a year and a half or something like that. And it's spectacular. I really like it. So if you're into that stuff, I would urge you to check that out. Regarding season 2, volume 1, has always been the case since the print edition started, that there are 3 main groups that get those books for free. Those are the transcribers, okay, with the deal that I've worked out with them kind of earlier, the beginning of this year, kind of, it seems like yesterday, but it was like the beginning of this year. The transcribers get books for free. The Patreon members at the $20 a month level and above get their print editions for free. Of course, it's not free. They contribute to Unfound every month. But as soon as I get print editions, I send those books off to the transcribers, to the Patreon members. In fact, I'm sure most of them get them and don't even realize it's coming to them. But I guess if they're watching this, they'll know now. I haven't got my copies yet. It was just yesterday that it became available, and I'll probably get my books sometime next week. So those are 2 of the groups. And then the third group, of course, most importantly, are the guests who appear in that particular book. So in this particular one, of course, we have Kent Jacobs, and starting with Kent Jacobs at the beginning of season 2, Aaron Gilbert, Tammy Leppert, Crystal Morrison, Linda K. Carroll, Nikki McCown, and I'm forgetting one more, and I hate when I can't think of it. Oh, Chris Turner. All of the guests for those episodes will be getting their books for free. So that is how you get the print edition. And of course, the retail price of those books on Amazon is $10.99, $11. If you were to buy one from me personally, it's the same price, except with those, I will sign them and put a private message in there just for you. You pay me the price of the book plus the shipping, which is very, very little, and I will ship a book out to you. That's how that all works. Trina, of course you can be a transcriber. Just send me a private message, Trina, through Messenger or through an unfoundpodcast@gmail.com, and I can put you on the list when I need some more transcribers, which I'm surely going to need before the year is over. EB, good to see you. Good to see you here tonight. Thank you for tuning in. So that's how that all works. If you're always wondering, well, what do you do with those books? Who gets them? Why do they get them? And I've been accused of trying to profit off of these books, which is crazy, because the ebook's $2.99. There's not a lot of money to be made there. The print editions are $11, and my cost for them, at least if you buy them off Amazon, there's not a lot of money to be made there. So it's always funny when I've been accused, not a lot, but a few people have come out of the woodwork to claim that. Trust me, I give so many books away, once again, to the groups that I've already talked about, that I'm not saying that, I'm not breaking even, but it's close to just, breaking even right in there. Because as I've stated, the reason that I do the books is because it raises the profile of all of these cases. That's why I do them. They're a lot of work. I'm sure you realize that now. The transcribers know it. me doing the program, me designing the cover, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, making sure everything comes out right, that they look good, et cetera. It's a lot of work. And there's no other podcast out there, no true crime podcast that does that. There's not one. Not one. But I do that because I believe it's one more way to raise the profile of these cases. And I've always said that for Unfound to be absolutely successful, it needs to branch out from podcasting. And the books are one of those ways. Along those lines, having just talked about the think tank and the books, you certainly should consider, if you are a longtime listener of Unfound, I would hope that you would consider being a Patreon member. Cherie is in here. I know Carrie's in here. Heather's in here. Some of Unfound's Patreon supporters. Especially at that $12 level, where you get to, talk to me. We get to talk in a very intimate setting, very private, where we get to throw around theories and different ideas about the case for that week. All right, and there are other benefits, of course, that come at that $12 a month level with ebooks and other things, when they come out. I know that it seems that, everybody that's become a member, at least that level, has stuck around for many months now. And you do get to maybe hear, how can I put this? That I don't do a lot of theorizing on the episodes, very little. And I know that some of you, maybe I even frustrate you when you contact me privately and ask me, hey, Ed, what do you think about this case, specifically an Unfound case? And I'm always very hesitant to talk about that. Well, in the think tank, I'm much more open because the goal is to throw around ideas, to get a consensus about a case that then I can bring back to guests, and tell them, what, we talked about. Some of them find it helpful, some of them maybe don't. But that's the goal, and that's why it's called the think tank. It's just not a bunch of people just getting together to gossip and talk and BS and everything. We are trying to be, constructive, and that's what we do on Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern. And it's a lot of fun. I think that we've gotten to be like a little club. The group is very small right now, 7, 8, 9 people, which is great. I'm very happy at that number. But if you'd like to be a part of it, of course, I will not stop you. So, please consider it. And all you have to do is go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast to be a supporter. So I hope you will consider that. And like I said, you get a lot of things for free when you do that. LaFord, why in the heck can't you make money? Why are people hating all that you do for the missing? It's a very, 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 very small group that has said this over maybe the last couple years, LaFord. The reason it's on my mind, just within maybe the last 6 weeks, this happened to pop up with a case that I covered, I don't know, 2018 maybe, that somebody was trying to say that I was profiting off of a disappearance or something, which is crazy. And it was some family member or something that it was totally, my guest for that episode couldn't be more pleased that, of what I'm doing, but somebody coming out of the woodwork doesn't know what the heck they're talking about. And it's just complete BS is really what it is. As I continue to say, I don't take any money from my guests. Zero. They don't pay to be on the program. I don't charge them. Nothing. Everything that they've gotten from me, advice, connections to other people and everything, all done for free. So there's that. I don't know. Sheree is saying $12 a month and all this goes back into the Unfound program, books, t-shirts. Yes, all that money allows those things to happen that I've talked about. Books and t-shirts that guests get. In fact, I have to work on t-shirts probably next week. So would love for you to be a part of it. If you've been following Unfound for a while and you believe that this program does things the right way. Let's move on to some other things. Austin Pivo, I haven't heard anything more than what has already been out there. We talked about it last week regarding remains being found on the Fort Hall reservation in a I guess, a secluded area of the reservation. That remains have been found. I've talked to Susan about it. They're doing DNA testing right now. My feeling is that Susan does believe that it is her son Austin, but I've heard nothing since last Wednesday when I talked about it then. I'm hoping that when she does get the results, whatever the case is, whatever the final verdict is, whether it is Austin, whether it isn't, I'm hoping that Susan will contact me and we can talk about it, and maybe there will be more facts that come out as to what the medical examiner thinks happened, etc. And if I think that that information is good to publicize to all of you, if I'm allowed to do that, if I think it's appropriate, then I will do that. However, I've not learned anything more than what I told you last Wednesday about Austin Pivo. I'm inclined to think that it is him. However, there was another young man who went missing on the Fort Hall reservation. His last name was Bronco, I think. So maybe it could be him. But it seems to me that my impression is that Susan is leaning toward the idea that it is her son. Maybe I need to talk about this. I posted this in the group, and I've got both public responses to it, and maybe before I should I get into this first, I want you to know that I've gotten a few questions, and I'm going to answer before the show's over, as I always do. But I don't have a ton. Last week the show went for like an hour and a half. If you'd like some questions to be answered tonight, whether it's about any of Unfound's cases or anything in particular, as long as it's PG and it's not too personal, I will be glad to answer it tonight. I don't have a lot of information, a lot of questions to go over tonight. So if there's anything on your mind as you're watching, please just type it in the live chat area and I will answer it. Once again, does not have to be podcasting or true crime related, as long as it's PG and as long as it's not too personal. Okay, so there you go. I posted this a few days ago, and like I was saying, I got some very public responses and some private responses to this, but I want to talk to you about it. For a while now, I've been throwing around the idea, and every once in a while, people do ask me about it. Ed, being you do what you do, are you ever going to get your private investigator license? I've gotten, and this was probably one of those questions I should have answered in that Q&A episode going way back to April or May, whenever that was. It just kind of slipped my mind, but for some reason it came back into my mind within the last week or so. I'm considering it, but you have to understand something. What I do, it's not required. There is no licensing or permission or anything else to do what I do. And I think that's what's so good about podcasting. Anybody can do it. And when it comes to true crime podcasting, that if you have the right frame of mind and the work ethic, and all you need is a simple computer, nothing fancy, nothing fancy as far as a microphone. Here's the microphone that I use. It's a Shure microphone. I think this microphone's like 15 years old. It even has the old school microphone connection on it. I know a lot of people just go with the USB these days. But, you don't need anything fancy, and I think that's great. Of course, I have a lot of other criticisms about the true crime community. But if you are in the right frame of mind and you can do it the right way, then I fully support what you're going to do, however you go about doing it. Once again, as long as it's moral, ethical, and legal. But as far as private investigator license, I really don't need it for what I do. Between myself, Cherie, Emily, Carrie, Heather, Eric, and some other people that have helped at different times with the program. Um, we do good research. There's a lot of databases out there that are out there for free. Um, and we do have access to all of them. And I know that, of course, Emily herself, she is a subscriber to a database, maybe even a couple that we use once in a while to try to reach people. Okay. So, what is the reason that I would do that? Well, first of all, there are things that private investigators can have access to. Hello, Carol, that the public does not, and I don't think that there's any particular um, money or fee you could pay to get to that type of information. First of all, second of all, I think what I've learned, and I've been doing this for 3 years now. I've seen a lot. I've heard a lot. I've read a lot. I've been told a lot, and the truth is that maybe we can even bring up, being that I know a lot of you are now aware of this, we could bring up like the Jonathan Estes case. And I have to say that that private investigator who, Jonathan's sister, talked about, we did not talk about him during the interview because it's clear to me that he is a con artist. And, unfortunately, he got interviewed for over an hour by John Lorden from Brain Scratch. Was it last week, the week before? And, it's his show. He can do what he wants. I would never put a guy on my program like that at all. At all. Because the guy is a scam artist. He is a liar. He's not professional. He tried to contact me. He wanted me to interview him like after Jonathan's case episode was out, and I completely turned him down because I know what went on between the Estes family and him. All right? He did not contact me in a very professional manner as a guy who has a private investigator's license and everything. And of course, that tipped me off that this guy isn't for real or not. And he took the Estes family for quite a bit of money. And once again, there's a reason we didn't talk about him during the interview, because I just don't want to give those types of people any attention, because that's what they're dying for. What you learn is that Jessica says, I saw him, thought he was full of it. Well, Jessica, you were not alone, because if you look at the comments to that interview for that other show, that's what most of them thought as well. And I guess that's good. But I think it's just better not to give these people the time of day, because they feed off that attention. And I believe in starving them by giving them no attention. No attention, surely, because I think that anybody I have on my program, I'm kind of endorsing what they say. I can never endorse what that guy says. So, and once again, the other, stipulation I have for Unfound is I'm never going to have anybody on my program who is going to try to mislead my guests or mislead the audience, okay? I'm not going to have any guests on who I believe are lying, and I'm not going to have any guests on who are going to try to mislead my audience. Just not going to do it. And so that guy would fall into both categories, so he can't be on the program. So that, getting back to what I started talking about, is there are too many people like that guy in the private investigator community. Too many. And there is room in that community for good people who want to do good work. That is obvious to me after 3 years. Obvious. And so, I look at that and I say, well, I'm a good guy. I know what I'm doing. Maybe that community does need me. And so that's why I am considering it. I think that just like, I'm not going to try to pat myself on the back with this. But I think that in the last 3 years in doing this program, I think that people's expectations for what they get out of a true crime podcast has been raised because of what we do here. We just do things a little differently. Okay? And I think my perception is it has raised the what's up, Stephanie? I think it has raised awareness to all of you. And I know you listen to other programs. I know you just don't listen to Unfound. I know you listen to other podcasts out there. I happen to believe that it has raised your expectations of what you want when you listen to a true crime podcast. I happen to believe that. I do believe that. And so I think that if I can bring that to the private investigation community by becoming one, I think that that is overall a good thing, because my perception is that there are just a lot of con women and con men out there. And that is nothing against any private investigator in particular. It's just, after all, after 3 years, and you hear so many stories, it's like, man, I wish I could do something about this. And maybe that thing that I need to do is become one myself. So I'm thinking about it. Now, of course, the problem that I, kind of, put with the post in the group and on the page is that I have a natural aversion to tests and internships and classes and all those things that I would have to do to become a private investigator in Florida. Okay, now I know there's a lot of states where you don't have to do anything, but most states you do at least have to do something. Pass a test, take a class, get your license, pay this, pay that. And it seems to me here in Florida, it's a little more stringent, more complicated than in other states, but this is where I live. So, I'm going to have to get over that. Internship sounds to me like something that I would never be a part of. So, I bet you do, Cherie. But I'm thinking about it. And, the other issue is these things sound like they're going to take time. Is it going to take time away from me putting out, the episodes every week? So I have to consider that and everything else. So I'm thinking about it. I don't believe I will make a decision next week, but I anticipate I will make a decision before the end of the year. And then, it may be that I go into 2020, with this as a plan to accomplish in 2020. But it's just not as simple as taking some online course, paying a fee, getting your license. It's way more complicated than that, at least in Florida. So, but I just thought I should talk about that, being that I posted and it did get some responses. Of course, someone like my good friend, former guest Caroline Lowe, who is one of the good private investigators out there, although at this point, I wouldn't say she's actively being a private investigator, but she does have her license in California. She certainly supports me getting my license and has given me a lot of, opinions and good advice, regarding it. I deeply, deeply appreciate her thoughts. She is certainly for me joining that community, as has Kevin Ryan, of course, a former guest for the Amanda DeGuio episode. He was a private investigator. He's also been very supportive, and I deeply thank him for that. He's a private investigator out of Pennsylvania. So, the response has been positive, but in the end, I'm the one that has to go through with it, take the classes, do the internship and all of that, and find out, put it into my busy schedule. So we'll see. But I wanted to run that all by you. I just wanted to be as open with all of you as I could be, being that I posted about that. Yes, I bet you do have a PI in particular, Cherie. LaFord, thank you for that. Harlem, how are you? I hope you are doing well tonight. Thank you, everybody who has tuned in. Where do we want to go next? How much can I say on this? The Dale Kerstetter video. You know, it's been what? Did that come out in August, I'm going to say, and the reason I'm talking about it is I had a conversation with someone today. I'm not going to reveal the person's name, but I was talking to somebody about it. And, you know, the video when it came out, you know, we thought that it was going to be this big thing, and it hasn't been. In fact, it seems at this point like it's been forgotten. So we wait all these years. Was it Muck Rock, something like that, that filed the FOIA? You finally get it. Everybody gets to see it, and the video is probably the worst video that I've ever seen as far as the quality of it. But my understanding, I can't tell you why I know or how I know or anything else, but and who's doing it. In fact, I don't even know the person's name myself. But there is somebody out there, at least one person, who is trying to clean it up. If you've watched it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't watched it, somewhere way down on the link somewhere down in the group or in the page, if you go way back down the feed to maybe early August or July, you will find it. And then you have to download a special program to watch it. It's a little laborious to do, but if you want to see it, my understanding is there is somebody out there who is trying to clean it up to make it a little more viewable, you know, a little more clear. And trust me, having seen what I saw, that is a lot of work. But, you know, I thought I'd better talk about it tonight, especially since I had this conversation earlier today, because it seems like the video has been forgotten. Everybody had these great expectations. It didn't meet anybody's expectations. And so it ends up that, it's no surprise then that it quickly falls out of the attention of everybody, because everybody looks at it and says, I don't know what to make of this. I can't see anything in it. Well, what I've done is, I hear that somebody's working on it, and I've made, of course, Unfound, all of its outlets available between the Facebook group, the Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, wherever else. I surely, would, once it's done, I would surely like to be the first person to publicize a cleaned up version of the video. And the reason I put it that way is that this person who is doing it, might want to remain anonymous. And that's perfectly fine by me. And like I said, at this point, I don't know who this person is anyway. But I've availed Unfound and all of its outlets to publicize that video so that the person who's actually doing it can remain anonymous, should this person want to do it that way. But I will keep you posted. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, but I just wanted to inform all of you that my impression is that somebody's working very hard out there, and it may be the only person in the world who is trying to make that video viewable. So when you watch it, you kind of can better understand, what is going on there. And I certainly applaud this person's work, because it is surely not easy given how bad that video is and all the static and everything in it. So there you go. Harlem says maybe police will come on the shows if you are PI. I think Harlem, I think it would be less likely that police would come on the program if I was a private investigator. I think, and plus, I don't think my attitude would change regarding the police. The reason I don't talk to police is because they don't tell me anything. I'm not interested in talking to people who aren't going to tell me anything. I'm a reporter. I know what they do on Disappeared and other, they get some, police officer, investigator to come on there, but pretty much they just have all the same canned answers. And on Unfound, we don't do canned answers. That's not what we do. So I'm just not going to waste my time. If there's ever a police officer or detective that wants to contact me and tell me things that aren't on the record or aren't at least in the public yet regarding a disappearance that they're responsible for, they know where to find me. I'm pretty easy to contact. So far, nobody's done that. I don't know what to tell you. Harlem, I don't think that would change if I became a PI. That the police, I don't think that. In fact, my knowing a few police officers who are confidants of mine that helped me with the program, I have to tell you that their attitude toward the private investigator community is not very positive. But that wouldn't deter me because I think the reason it's not positive is because they know of so many con women and con men out there who are just taking people's money and not doing anything for it. And so I would join the private investigator community in a way to, you know, start infusing it with good people, and maybe that'll push the bad people out. So there you go. Let's talk about the news now. Maybe some of you have been waiting for this. We have to talk about. It's funny how these things happen right after the YouTube show happens. But last Thursday, or maybe it was even after the show. Maybe it was even before even Thursday got started, at least in Eastern time. Sheriff Lewis in Hemp Hill County has decided that he is not going to run for re-election. The news broke once again either late Wednesday night or Thursday morning last week, so September 18th or September 19th. And he in turn also wrote something for the Canadian Record and explaining the reason he's doing this, and explaining also some of the other things that are going to go on. But my understanding is his plan is to continue to serve out his term until it's over. So, and that's going to be like a year from now. So, but already, he's already saying that he will not be running, but he's going to stay on for another year. I've had a chance to talk to people who know much more about the election procedures in Hemp Hill County than I do, or just in Texas over. Okay, given everything that's going on in Tom's case, I surely understand that. Now, but I've been informed that the totally outside of the Tom Brown case is that the reason that Sheriff Lewis might have announced now and not 2 months from now or March of next year that he wasn't going to run again is because there's paperwork that soon needs to be filed regarding anybody who is going to be running for any type of office, including sheriff in Hemp Hill County. And so what this person told me is that the reason that he's probably announcing now is because people will shortly realize when he didn't fill out his paperwork to rerun, that the news would break that he didn't do that, and that's how everybody would find out that he's not going to run again. So he just decided he's not going to run again. He might as well announce it and kind of get the news out there before people find out in some other way. This is what I've been told, all right, by one person who is in a position to know these things. And I specifically asked this person that question. Is there anything paperwork-wise that Sheriff Lewis would have to have filled out if he wanted to run next year, but then he decides not to, and so he's just going to announce that he's not running now? This person said that makes a lot of sense. Although this person doesn't know that for a fact, the way this person understands and really knows how paperwork and elections happen there, this is what I've been told, that it very well could be that Sheriff Lewis decided he wasn't going to run months ago and just decided now because the deadline for filling out paperwork is coming up, maybe even at the end of this month. EB says, I'm glad. I think Penny should run so we can get to the bottom of Tom's case. That's an interesting thought. A little bit agrees with EB. Sheree says, right, that makes sense. Also, if you can't stand the heat, you have to get out of the kitchen. Well, that may be, Sheree. It may be that all of this stuff, and of course, I know everybody's theories regarding Tom's case. There is not a theory that I haven't heard. But I will say overall, and I have it even in my notes here, is that I did not see that coming. Hello, Jasmine. What's going on? I did not see him not running for re-election. In fact, I will tell you that, and I think I've said this since, but when I was in Canadian Texas at the end of July, my impression was that Sheriff Lewis was going to easily win again. And I realized the election's over, it was over a year away. It's still over a year away. But that he would have won again very easily, if for no other reason that I don't know if anybody was going to run against him. For that reason alone, of course, that would be a big reason. If nobody runs against you, you can't lose. That probably no one was going to run against him, so he was almost guaranteed to win and serve out another term as sheriff of Hemphill County. So knowing that he has decided not to run, of course, was very surprising to me, given what I've been told about the prospects for next year. Okay, now, having said that, I believe that one of his deputies, is it Clappett or Clampett or something like that, he's going to be running. And I think that some other deputy may be running as well. Now, what does that all mean? I don't know. I know people will makes all sorts of theories and conspiracies and conjecture and everything like that. And they're going to do that. But I have to say that I did not see, I'm always willing to admit when I'm wrong or I didn't see something coming, and I've done that in a few cases now. But I certainly could have never predicted that Sheriff Lewis would choose not to run. Now, the big question is he actually going to, serve out his term? And this is another question I asked a person in a position who would truly understand these things. I don't believe he will. I think what will happen is that he will serve until the primaries are over. And then when it's fairly obvious of probably who is going to win in the election, even though the election has not happened yet, that he will then step down and appoint this person, maybe Clampett, whoever, Clappett, whatever his last name is. He will then pick that guy to serve out his term, and then that person will get elected, and it will, continue on. So I have my doubts that he will serve out. Clappett is the Beverly Hills. Thank you, Cherie. Thank you. That's what I was thinking. Okay. I just have doubts just from an ease of transition point of view, because this is no different than probably, the sheriff is a political position. This is no different than any politician who announces well before that he's not going to run. What's it called? Lame duck. He's a lame duck sheriff. Everybody knows that he's leaving, and so maybe he's not going to be taken as seriously as he should be. We've heard of like lame duck presidencies. Of course, in the United States, presidents can only serve 2 terms, and once they start getting into that second term and there's a couple years left, the opposite party says, we don't have to listen to this guy. We can just ride it out and wait for the next election. So I have the idea that the Sheriff Lewis will probably resign. I'm going to guess probably March or April. But that's still a ways off. That's still 6 months off. Unless something happens before then. So, it was, like I said, it was a little shocking. But I will tell you this. Now, having been as diplomatic as I can be regarding this topic, I will tell you this. And look my hair for a second. It is now time. If somebody wants to do it, it is now time, being that Sheriff Lewis is not going to be sheriff at some point down the road, whether it's tomorrow or a year from now or whenever. It's now time to start looking into why all of those deputies quit when he did get elected back in 2016. It's time to talk to all those deputies. It was at least 75% of the deputies back in 2016 who were working under um, James Pearson, who, when they found out that Sheriff Lewis was going to be the next sheriff, that all of those 75% of them quit. They quit without having another job. All right. Now, you know that I've talked to a couple of them, and I think you know what they've told me. Well, now it's time for someone in that area. I don't think the Canadian Record is going to do it, but maybe someone in Amarillo News, in Perryton News, in Lubbock News, someplace outside of there, that now, being that he's not going to be sheriff, now an investigation can start into why those deputies quit. Because nobody's ever done that. I know what they've told me because I've talked to a couple of them. But it's time for somebody in that area to take that story seriously and to do it now that Sheriff Lewis, we know that he's not going to be sheriff anymore, and talk to these people and hear their stories, because I've been told they've told me their stories. It's now time to do that. All right, I'm putting that on the record right now. EB, can he take case files with him when he leaves? I don't think that he can, EB. I don't think that that would be. I don't think that would be legal. He might have his own personal notes and things, but official paperwork, that is property of the government of Hemphill County. That is not Sheriff Lewis's personal possessions. So, but the time is now to start looking into and talking to some of these former deputies who just quit cold turkey and left Hemphill County. It's time. Let's go on to, let me answer a couple questions here. Tamara, I don't know if you're in the audience tonight, but I'm going to answer your question. Besides Stephen Kocher, which is a case that I was involved in, being that I lived in Las Vegas at the time, are there any other cases that I am connected to like that? The answer is no. That was a very unique situation. I lived in Las Vegas at the time. Stephen Kocher disappeared about 7 miles from where I lived. I lived on South Maryland Parkway. I lived on a little road called Raggedy Ann Drive. You can look it up. That's really what it's called. And he disappeared about 7 miles from where I lived. I've been on that street. I've walked that street. Of course, I talked about that during the Stephen Kocher episode from a year ago. But that is the only one that I was connected to like that. Now, I will say that from my childhood, there was the disappearance of Sherry Mahan from Saxonburg, Pennsylvania, which was about, I don't know, 25 minutes from where I used to live in Leechburg, Pennsylvania. That happened in 1985. That is a case that still resonates with me because I remember I was a teenager. I remember it happening. I remember the stories. I remember the articles in the Valley News Dispatch, which still is the newspaper for that area. And so I think that is one that still, echoes in my mind because of, where it happened, when it happened. And I've actually, not this past summer, but the summer of 2018, I actually got to go to the location where she disappeared. And I was very fortunate to be able to do that because, in fact, I have a video on the Unfound YouTube channel of me being there. And I was very fortunate because a woman who I went to high school with ended up marrying a guy who was on the bus with Sherry Mahan the day she disappeared. And so she was there. She brought her husband. He and I talked. I took some video. I did some commentary. So, that's another one that still resonates with me. But it's, again, because of when and where it happened, near my hometown of Leechburg, Pennsylvania, when it was February of 85, so I would have been in 9th grade. No, 8th grade. So, there you go. I hope that answers your question, Tamara. But besides that, all of the other cases, that I've covered for Unfound are ones that, of course, did not happen near where I live. Although I will say that Kelly Rothwell, disappeared, right down the street from where I live now, and even when I lived in Madeira Beach, the same thing, very close here. But I didn't live here at the time yet. She disappeared in early 2011. I didn't move here till later in 2011. But I drive right by where her car was found all the time. All the time. Priscilla says there was a report that Lewis was being investigated by the Texas Rangers, but nothing was ever heard about that. Well, we hear a lot of things, Priscilla. We hear a lot of things. I don't know what to tell you. Let me touch upon this story. We're already, man, this time is flying. Did you see the story that I posted about the Lubbock Medical Examiner's Office? The Texas Rangers, the FBI, and the U.S. Attorney's Office raided the Lubbock Medical Examiner's Office a few days ago. That's a fairly big deal. You don't quite expect that. A fairly large city for various levels of government, Justice Department, etc., to come in and raid it. There are a lot of different possibilities. In fact, I had a short conversation with one of my law enforcement confidants in Texas about all of this, and she gave me a whole list of different possibilities of what could have happened there. But I will tell you this: somebody else, a totally different person in law enforcement in Texas, told me that the rumor that he heard, and I usually don't like to market rumors, but this is something that it seems to resonate with me, and it could very well be true, given that all of the different offices, authorities that went and raided the medical examiner's office. The rumor is that they might have been selling or giving away body parts to science without telling families. That's something that I heard. And it comes from somebody that I think would be in a position to kind of know these things. So it wasn't like somebody from Brazil who was telling me this, somebody who is in law enforcement in Texas that had heard this, that this particular medical examiner's office might have been taking body parts off of dead victims and selling them to science. We'll see, but if that's the case, that would surely explain why the Rangers, the FBI, and the U.S. Attorney's Office are there. That would surely warrant all of them getting involved, because that sounds horrible. But I just wanted to talk about that. I have to admit, being that we have covered a couple cases from Lubbock, Zoe Campus's case, of course, that has been solved, and Jennifer Wilkerson's case, that, we had these questions as to, Zoe Campus's case. Remember what happened. Allegedly, the police looked over that house and found nothing. Then they go back there 5 years later, and they decide, find her body that's buried in the backyard. Does that have anything to do with the medical examiner's office? No, but I do have to admit that it did occur to me, man, it does seem maybe there is some incompetence that is going on in Lubbock right now. Tamara says, thanks, Ed. It did answer my question. Facebook has my maiden name. Well, Tamara, you're welcome. I'm glad that I answered your question sufficiently. Cherie says, this was their second time to be raided in the last couple of years. That's news to me, Cherie. I did not know that. I'd be interested to know what was the reason it got raided the first time. Was it ever made public? I did not know that. Okay. But from what I was told, that, and probably some of you are probably wondering this right now, that Tom Brown's remains were not examined by the Lubbock medical examiner's office. So we can maybe head that off at the pass right now. Okay, so there's that. Of course, we'll keep tabs on that. And Cherie, if you can find an article on why it was rated the first time, surely post that in the group. Let me know why that was. And if you find an article on that, please post it in the group. I'm sure people would like to read about that. There's something else. Let me answer this other question. Of course, it's going to be off the topic because Larry loves asking me topics off the topic that have nothing to do with true crime, which is fine. Larry, he asked me last week, what kind, if you'll remember, what kind of lunchbox I had, etc. Well, this week he's asking me if I've ever been to an emergency room as a patient. I think I'm just taking granted as a patient. The answer is no. The last time I was in an emergency room was, even though, of course, with my mother passing away last year, I spent a lot of time in the hospital, but I wasn't in the emergency room. Had to have been 2015, maybe. My brother Brian took a snooze and he woke up and one of his salivary glands had gotten all backed up somehow. And so it was growing and everything. And so he had to go to the emergency room. And then I ended up meeting him there at the emergency room. But me personally, no, I've never had to go to an emergency room ever. In fact, all of you should know, I've never even broken a bone in my life. And I played basketball. I played baseball. I was into drag racing. I lift weights. Of course, I disc golf. I'm a fairly, even to this day, a fairly active guy. And I've never even broken a bone. So I've never really had a reason to go to the emergency room. And I don't really get sick that much. So, Larry, your answer is no. I've never been to an emergency room. In fact, the only, I can tell you the surgeries that I've had done in my life. When I was very, very small, very young, I had tubes put in my ears because my ears were not draining correctly. And so for a while as a little kid, when I would go to the pool or something, I'd have to put that wax in my ears and wear one of those bathing caps. It was very, very embarrassing. But I had that done at Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh back in probably like 1974 or something like that. And I still remember that. I do remember that being done way back then. I can remember waking up in the hospital as a little kid and everything. In fact, I even remember going to the hospital. And the only other things I've had 2 wisdom teeth taken out. Those are the only operations that I've ever had done in my life. I still have my appendix. I still have my gallbladder. I don't know what to tell you. I think I've been a fairly, healthy guy. So no, I've never had to go to the emergency room, and I hope I never have to. So there's that. Even though I do have some medical issues, I do have, unfortunately, naturally high cholesterol that I take care of with the generic Lipitor that I take every other day. I just take a very small dose, but that's about it. I really don't have not had very many medical issues in my life. So I hope that answers your question, Larry. One more thing before I talk about Tyler North's case, the case that we will be covering this Friday. Let me see here. Priscilla says, happy to hear you haven't been a patient. Me too, Priscilla. Me too. And trust me, given, what went on with my mother last year, I went to the hospital 10 days in a row. I was there from like 9 o'clock in the morning till 10 at night for 10 days in a row until she passed away. If I never see a hospital for the next 30 years, I'll be good. I'll be good. That's perfectly fine by me. I want to talk, maybe this is kind of, out of nowhere that I'm going to bring this up, but I just want all of you to think about that. I know that all of you have very passionate opinions about what happened to Tom Brown, okay, and his remains being found. And I know that a large majority of you reject the idea that he committed suicide. You reject the idea that he could have walked, 12, 13 miles, however long it was, from where his car, his Durango was, to where his remains were found. And that all makes total sense. Okay? But Karen says, Ed, you were always interesting, whatever you talk about. Well, thank you, Karen. I try to be. Being that everybody's tuning in here, I think I better be interesting. I just want you to think about this. I want to bring up the case, and I'm sure a lot of you know this case, and that is the case of Matrice Richardson, a young woman who was having some mental issues. She was in Malibu. She went to a restaurant. She didn't pay the bill. This is a case that was covered on Disappeared because she was missing for a while, and then her remains were found. She went to a restaurant, a fancy restaurant, didn't pay. They called the cops. They took her and booked her into the jail. And there's a lot of, there have been some lawsuits filed as to whether the police there in Malibu handled her case the right way. Because it seems that when she was in the restaurant, she was having some issues. Okay? And she had a car, she had her purse, and whatever else. And they towed her car, they put all of their stuff in there, and took her to the police station, which was not close to where the restaurant was. And then at some point, it seemed like, at least to the police officers, it seemed like she was fine, and they let her go. Of course, some of the things that are still up in the air is, well, if they let her go, why didn't they let her drive her car, etc. There are still a lot of questions regarding this, okay, even to this day, even though this case is not recent. But she ended up being found 6 miles away. She was found dead, unfortunately, about a year later. And she was found dead in a canyon in Malibu. And at that point, when she was found a year later, her body was mummified. Okay? And there was no cause of death that could be determined. Even though it sounds to me like there were way more of her remains still intact compared to Tom's, that even in her case, that a cause of death could not be determined. And in fact, reading about the case like I did today, there was even like a well-known reporter in the LA area, where she ended up, whatever was going on in her mind after she was let out of the jail, that she was walking on this guy's property in the backyard. And, she just said that she was just passing through or something. Well, her body was ended up being found 6 miles from where the police station was. And at least at this point in 2019, there is no allegations that she was murdered or anything like that. Even though there are some people out there that believe that, I don't know how much proof there is. I guess what I'm trying to say here, and once again, I'm not you, I think all of you know what I think, but I think this illustrates why these missing persons cases, and in fact, when a body is found, that they can still be very difficult. Okay? And there doesn't necessarily, have to be a conspiracy or anything like that. Here's a woman who seemingly walked 6 miles. We don't know what happened to her, but her body was there. It was mummified, so it was in much more complete condition than Tom's. It was examined. No cause of death was found, even though her body was intact. And still, we're left to wonder how she died. And I think this Matrice Richardson case, I think it's like 10 years old or even older than that now. I think the Disappeared episode came out in 2012. So obviously this all happened before that. I just want you to remember that, because these things do happen in disappearance cases where people do walk off. They are found, maybe not 13 miles away, but 6 miles. And, having been to Malibu, going to Malibu, I know what you're going to think, but I've been to Malibu a few times. In fact, I went to a funeral at a church in Malibu way back in about 2000. So I've been there, and it's rough terrain, even though everybody thinks Malibu is a ritzy area, and it is, but it has some very deep canyons. You could easily get lost in them, and it gets hot there. You could easily get dehydrated and die. So, don't think it's all just, mansions there. It's not. It's absolutely not. But this just shows you that there are circumstances where people can walk off. Of course, in this case, maybe Matrice wasn't in a right frame of mind, get lost, and die from the elements. And she was a young woman, just a little older than Tom was. And these things do happen. Okay? And once again, this is what makes Tom's case, Matrice Richardson's case, and a bunch of other cases like that where bodies have been found. There's no, cause of death. It just looks like the person just killed over right at that point, and they aren't found for a year, 5 years, or whatever. And a cause of death cannot be determined. It is not as unusual as you think. I would say it's rare, but it's not unusual. So I just wanted to bring that up. If you're not familiar with Matrice Richardson's case, I can't call it a disappearance because she was found, but it was a disappearance for a while. You should look it up. And I would like to know that when you read it, if you kind of see, the general similarities to Tom's case. I just don't want anybody to get the idea. Are you saying that Tom walked those 12, 13 miles and died? I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that there's a reason, and it doesn't have to be a conspiracy, why his body can be found and a cause of death hasn't been determined, because there are all sorts of situations where people have left their cars, walked off, their bodies are found a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, and in the end, there is no cause of death that can be determined. It happens. And it doesn't have to have anything to do with a crooked sheriff or some vast conspiracy or anything else. Sometimes, this is what happens. Okay? I just want to tell that to all of you. I don't want you to think about Tom Brown's case. Well, nothing like this has ever happened ever in the history of true crime. It's just not the case. It's just not. And that's why I'm bringing up Matrice Richardson's, because I was familiar with it and reading it. I thought this might be a good example of a situation like we're talking about. Cherie says, Lubbock ME has been under investigation since February 2019. Might not have been raided. Still looking. Could have sworn I read it somewhere. Also could be a mistake. That would be number 2 for Cherie tonight. Well, we're going to give you some leeway, Cherie. I know that you've had a cold. You've been a little sick. So if you're off a game a little bit tonight, that's fine. All right, so I wanted to talk about that. And once again, I don't want anybody, to misconstrue. Are you now saying you believe that Tom, did commit suicide? I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is there are many cases in the United States, at least, that kind of echo the kind of circumstances we have in Tom. But each case, of course, is unique. And it very well may be in some of these cases where a cause of death couldn't be determined that those people were murdered. But it's also possible that they weren't. And just because a body is found many miles away doesn't necessarily mean that there was foul play. Okay, you have to look at the totality of the situation. All right, let's talk about the disappearance of Tyler North. He disappeared from Hyden, Kentucky, which is in Harlan County. No, it's not. He lived in Harlan County, but he disappeared in Hyden, Kentucky, which is in a different county. He disappeared on June 24th, 2018. And this is an episode I am calling Sunday in the Park, because he disappeared on a Sunday, and there was a sighting of him pulling into a local park the night of June 24th, and he was never seen after that. The last place he was at his sister's, and his sister Sam is my guest for the episode this Friday. I interviewed her on Monday night, and she did a great interview. And he was at her house. He left that evening. She thought that he was headed home. Well, it just so happened that her husband was leaving for work doing a night shift at the same time. And her husband was out in front of uh, Tyler's car, and they were going down the road. And at some point, her husband kept going, but in his rear view mirror, he saw Tyler pull off into this park. It's called Kaywood Park. Didn't think much about it. Of course, the next day he finds out that Tyler never made it home, and he didn't go to work on that Monday. And so this is why we're calling it Sunday in the Park. A week later, Tyler's Dodge Dakota truck was found burnt to a crisp, kind of like in the Jeremy Burt case, 20 miles away in a strip mine. Now, this case is going to bring two statistics in that I probably talk about the most regarding disappearances. One being relationships, and the other fact that the number one, at least legal occupation that is usually involved in disappearances are people in law enforcement. And we have both in this case. And in fact, if you can believe it, there is a deputy involved in this case who has since been fired because he was stealing stuff from the sheriff's office. What's his last name? Lewis. You can't make this stuff up, people. You just cannot make this stuff up. His first name is not Nathan, though. His name is Jeremy, and he got caught after Tyler disappeared. He got caught selling equipment and other things from the sheriff's office to the tune of $11,000. Now, the reason this is important is because Jeremy was dating Tyler's ex-wife, Michelle, and according to Michelle herself, Michelle and Tyler were meeting in that park that night for a sex rendezvous. Of course, she claims that he never showed up. The problem, as you will hear in the episode, Trina, this is from 2018. The problem, of course, is that, and you will hear in the episode, is that the phone pings for Michelle, Jeremy, and Tyler all happen in that park that night. But we just don't know. As you will hear Tyler's sister say, she just doesn't know the timestamp. She's been told that all three of their phones pinged in the park that night. She just doesn't know the timing of those pings. So this is a case that was brought to me by a friend, a woman who got involved. She's not even a member of the family. She had contacted me privately, asking me if I'd be interested in covering the case because she got to know Tyler's sister, Sam. And I said, I'm, of course, very interested. This probably would have been early August. And I got to talk to Sam a couple times, and then we did the interview on Monday night. So that is going to be the disappearance and that is a case that's on NamUs, and it's also on the Charlie Project. Once again, the disappearance of Tyler North from Hyden, Hyden, Kentucky, on June 24th, 2018. It's an episode I'm calling Sunday in the Park, and the guest is his sister, Sam Perry. So I think that's about it. And one more thing, if you didn't notice, I was on, I posted it in the discussion group and on the page. I was actually interviewed earlier today regarding this case, local TV in the area. I did a Skype interview with one of their reporters, And now that is posted in the group and on the page. If you'd like to look at that, I was happy. They contacted me this morning. I said, sure, let's do it. And we made it happen. It's the first time in a while that that's gone on. So what do we do tonight? Talked about how beautiful it's been in Clearwater Beach. Talked about the Tiffany Johnson poll. We talked about season 2 of volume 1. Talked about Austin Pivo. We talked about the Tom Brown case again, according to Sheriff Lewis deciding not to run for re-election. We talked about the possibility of me becoming a private investigator. Talked about the Dale Kerstetter video. Talked about Patreon and the think tank. I'd certainly, appreciate it if you become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. We talked about the Lubbock Medical Examiner's Office. We talked about Matrice Richardson and just a short comparison to the Thomas Brown case, and took a couple questions regarding some cases maybe that I feel connected to. I answered Larry's question about the emergency room, and then finally we talked about the case we'll be covering this Friday, the disappearance of Tyler North. That's all I got. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. If you tuned in late, of course, this will be automatically available for reviewing on YouTube, and you will hear me Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern for the disappearance of Tyler North and me interviewing his sister, Sam Perry. That's all I got for tonight. I thank you so much for tuning in. I know somebody said that I could talk about anything and make it interesting. I hope you all found it interesting tonight. I work really hard to do that, and you will hear me on Friday. Good night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Deeply, deeply appreciate it. See ya.